When it comes to technology that seeks to bring classic works to modern audiences, certainly among the most controversial is colorizing black and white movies. Critics and directors have long been opposed to this process, and I do have to agree with them. It's basically altering the director and cinematographer's work away from what they intended the movie to look like, and seems to mostly exist for people who have little interest in watching black and white movies. And to be honest, putting out Casablanca or It's a Wonderful Life in color is not exactly going to make certain people more interested in watching them. Interesting enough, there was a time when movie colorization was a legitimate part of the art form. Even though his films were shot in black and white, George Méliès had artists handpaint them in color, including his most famous work, A Trip to the Moon. He was not the only filmmaker who did this, although it was a time-consuming process. Eventually, systems like Technicolor allowed for easier adoption of color films, although black and white films remained a popular choice until the late 60s. A lot of people associate colorization with Ted Turner, but there was interest in turning black and white movies into color even before him, mainly with animation. Classic black and white cartoons were colorized in the 60s and 70s, including some Looney Tunes and Fleischer Brothers shorts, but the results were not regarded as satisfactory. Colorization really picked up speed in the 80s, not only for possible television rebroadcasting, but also the rise of home video. Ted Turner was particularly supportive of doing this after buying the classic MGM library, and there were other executives in favor of it too. The creative community was less than enamored, though. Directors and actors like Woody Allen, Sidney Pollack, and Ginger Rogers even testified against the process of colorization in front of the United States Congress. Other people opposed to it included Jimmy Stewart and Orson Welles. Someone who was initially supportive was Frank Capra, but then changed his mind after one of the colorization companies decided to not allow him to have any say in how his films would be altered. The uproar over colorization is actually what led to the creation of the National Film Registry as a way to help preserve important films. Gene Siskel and Roger Ebert devoted an entire show to what they refer to as vandalism, and it's an episode that's well worth watching. Siskel makes a particularly good point about the way a Frank Sinatra movie was colorized.
Look at this scene of Frank Sinatra in the assassination thriller Suddenly. What's wrong? His eyes. Old Blue Eyes is back, all right. Look at this, as Old Brown Eyes.
That episode aired in 1986, and there's a part where both Siskel and Ebert say at least nobody will have the gall to colorize Citizen Kane. That assumption proved incorrect, as Turner did indeed ask for that famous Orson Welles classic to be turned into color. The last 10 minutes were colored as a test, but the project was then abandoned after Turner Entertainment found out that Welles' original contract with RKO specified the film had to be in black and white, and I guess they did not want to deal with the possible legal ramifications of that. A little bit of footage was eventually screened in a BBC documentary, and many were glad the rest of the movie would remain untouched. Turner was not the only company that produced colorizations of classic movies. Disney made colorized versions of a couple of their black and white movies, including The Shaggy Dog and The Absent-Minded Professor. These aired on the Disney Channel and were even later released on VHS and DVD. Thankfully, the versions of those movies on Disney Plus are the original black and white theatrical cuts. Colorization companies also went all out with public domain titles, since they did not have to worry about rights holders and paying residuals. Eventually, Turner did back down on this and stopped colorizing films. He even started Turner Classic Movies, which vowed always to show movies uncut and unaltered, a promise that remains intact to this day. However, colorization did not entirely die off. A company named Legend Films specializes in colorizing black and white movies. They are primarily known for colorizing public domain movies like Plan 9 from Outer Space, Reefer Madness, and Roger Corman's Little Shop of Horrors. However, Legend has also partnered with major studios. They've worked with Universal Pictures on a colorized version of the musical Holiday Inn, and with Paramount Pictures on It's a Wonderful Life, both of which were released on DVD alongside the original black and white versions. I've mainly talked about movies being colorized, but classic television shows have also been colorized by various companies, including I Love Lucy, Bewitched, The Honeymooners, and The Dick Van Dyke Show. Something that's become common lately is taking historic footage and colorizing it for documentaries, and this has been a lot less polarizing. Why? I think the main reason is because there's historical interest in seeing what life actually looked like many years ago. That's what Peter Jackson sought to do when he directed the World War I documentary, They Shall Not Grow Old. He wanted to portray what the soldiers would have realistically seen when they were fighting in the trenches and battlefields. I thought he did a decent job of colorizing the footage and depicting the reality of the war through his use of the archival material. Thus, there is a bit of value in colorizing films of this nature. However, I assume Jackson would definitely balk the notion of colorizing his favorite film, King Kong, as he would basically be redirecting what Marion C. Cooper and Ernest B. Schoedsack worked so hard to achieve. And that's one of the main problems that comes from colorizing black and white movies. When a filmmaker makes a movie in black and white, they light it in a specific way that uses the lack of color as a way to tell the story, and using that to their advantage. There can also be production reasons for why it was made in black and white. The original plan for John Ford's How Green Was My Valley was to film it on location in Wales in Technicolor. However, World War II made that difficult, so the decision was made to film it in California in black and white to obscure the fact that they did not actually film it in a small Welsh town. And yet Ford and cinematographer Arthur C. Miller still managed to convey the green fields of Wales through the photography. I mentioned Citizen Kane earlier, and that's a movie where the black and white cinematography was instrumental. The way certain scenes are filmed and lit is important in showing how Charles Foster Kane changes over the course of the story. Greg Toland and Orson Welles worked so much in sync to capture the unique look of Citizen Kane that was unlike anything ever achieved in Hollywood before, and what Welles learned directing his first movie will be pivotal to his subsequent work, like The Magnificent Ambersons and Touch of Evil, which also used cinematography and lighting to bring their worlds and characters to life. Colorizing those movies would basically wipe away the hard work that Welles put into those movies to achieve his desired look. Another movie where black and white photography proved an important tool was Alfred Hitchcock's Psycho. Part of this was because he reused the crew from his television show, including DP John L. Russell. Filming it in black and white also gave Hitchcock more freedom in how he directed the more violent sequences, including the famous shower scene. Furthermore, shooting it this way is the reason why chocolate syrup was used for the fake blood, and it even inspired Bernard Herrmann when he was writing the score. If Psycho had been filmed in color, we might not have gotten the iconic string themes. And then you have films made after the golden age of Hollywood, where black and white photography is also important. Part of the charm of Kevin Smith's Clerks is that it has the feel of watching security camera footage. That movie is filmed in black and white, partly because of the extremely low budget and partly for another reason. Smith's DP, Dave Klein, told him that the fluorescent lights in the quick-stop convenience store would seriously affect the visual appearance of the film. He suggested that filming it in black and white would avoid those problems, and that ultimately benefited Clerks in the end. When a company decides to colorize a black and white movie, it takes away from these important creative decisions the director, cinematographer, and other crew members made when constructing what we see on screen. Finally, you have the issue of what many colorized films look like. Watching them, the actors' skin tones just don't look quite right, and there's something off-putting about how the sets and costumes look. Ginger Rogers described the feeling of watching her movies colorized as looking like she was painted up like a birthday cake on the television screen. It just ends up looking distracting more often than not. Companies defended the practice by saying they were trying to appeal to younger viewers who don't want to see a black and white movie. I'm aware there are those who don't find black and white movies appealing. But why? Do they think they're boring or ugly? I've been watching black and white movies since I was a child, and never had a problem with the fact that they were not in color. I became a fan of Charlie Chaplin movies later on, and those are almost all in black and white. I won't deny there is a certain curiosity factor, but the way the cinematographer intended the film to look will more often be the preferred way to watch a movie. And watching Casablanca, or It Happened One Night, or Modern Times in color won't make those films better in my opinion. But what do you think of colorization? Let me know in the comments, and I'll see you next time.